Welcome, dear viewers. Today, we bring you a timeless tale, one that captures love, loss, and the delicate balance between reason and emotion. This is Sense and Sensibility, a beautiful story that explores the strength of family, the power of character, and the bittersweet journey of the heart. You're listening to Vintage Tales Narrations, where stories from classic literature come to life. So sit back, relax, and let the story unfold. Our story begins in the beautiful county of Sussex, at an estate known as Norland Park. Here, the Dashwood family had lived for generations, respected, comfortable, and content. The estate was held by an elderly bachelor who, in his final years, found joy and companionship in his nephew, Mr. Henry Dashwood, his kind wife, and their three charming daughters, Elinor, Marianne, and Margaret. Their care and cheerfulness brought warmth to his lonely days. Henry Dashwood's daughters had little fortune of their own. Their hopes rested entirely on their father's inheritance of Norland Park. Henry also had one son, John, from a previous marriage, already wealthy, while his wife and daughters depended solely on him for their future. But fate had other plans. When the old gentleman passed away, his will revealed a cruel twist. Norland would belong to Henry Dashwood only for his lifetime, and upon his death, everything, house, land, and fortune, would pass to his son John and eventually to John's young child. Mr. Dashwood was devastated. His wife and daughters were left with nothing but a small token, £1,000 each. Still, he hoped to save money and secure their future. But death came too soon. Within a year, he too passed away, leaving his family with only £10,000 to survive on. On his deathbed, he called for his son, John, and with a trembling voice, begged him to care for his stepmother and sisters. John promised, sincerely or so it seemed. That promise gave the dying man peace. John Dashwood was not cruel by nature, but he was weak, selfish, and easily influenced, especially by his wife, Fanny Dashwood, who was far worse. At first, John truly intended to help his sisters, planning to give them £3,000 in total. But Fanny's greed soon took over. "How could you rob our dear little boy of his inheritance?" she cried. £3,000. It would ruin him. Slowly, skillfully, she worked on John's weakness, turning his good intentions into self-serving logic. Step by step, the promise shrank, from 3,000 to 500 to nothing. Perhaps, John reasoned, a small present of £50 now and then would be enough. Fanny smiled, her mission complete. By the time she was done, John had convinced himself that helping meant merely sending fish or game as neighborly gestures. And so, a solemn promise made at a deathbed was destroyed by greed and selfish persuasion. Soon after, Mrs. John Dashwood arrived at Norland, uninvited, ungracious, and installed herself as mistress of the house. Mrs. Dashwood, heartbroken and humiliated, wanted to leave immediately. But her eldest daughter, Elinor, calm and rational, persuaded her to stay, at least until they had somewhere else to go. Elinor was the voice of sense, wise beyond her 19 years. Marianne, on the other hand, was sensibility itself, passionate, impulsive, full of feeling. The contrast between them was striking, and it would soon define the course of their lives. Months passed, and the widow and her daughters remained at Norland as mere guests in their own home. Every familiar corner reminded them of what they had lost. Yet one unexpected presence made their stay bearable: Edward Ferrars, Fanny Dashwood's brother. Edward was not the image of a romantic hero, not handsome, not confident, but gentle, thoughtful, and kind-hearted. Mrs. Dashwood quickly noticed his growing affection for Elinor. She believed it was only a matter of time before they married. Elinor, however, was cautious. Her affection for Edward was quiet, sincere, but restrained. She knew too well that his fortune depended on his overbearing mother, who expected him to marry wealth, not love. Marianne could not understand her sister's composure. To her, love was supposed to be wild, consuming, and poetic. "His reading," she exclaimed one evening, "is so spiritless. How could Elinor love a man who reads poetry without passion?" Elinor only smiled, for she saw in Edward something far deeper than outward passion. Goodness, honesty, and understanding. The sisters' differences, sense and sensibility, began to show more than ever. As days passed, Mrs. Dashwood grew convinced of Edward and Elinor's love. But reality was not so simple. Elinor, ever practical, reminded Marianne that Edward's situation was uncertain. His mother, Mrs. Ferrars, would never approve of a poor match. Marianne, unable to contain her feelings, burst out, "Esteem him? Like him? Elinor, that's cold-hearted. How can you speak of love in such calm terms?" Elinor laughed softly. "Believe my feelings stronger than I declare, Marianne," she said gently. "But I am not sure of his affection, and I will not hope without reason." Their conversation revealed the heart of the story. One sister ruled by logic, the other by emotion, both destined to be tested by love. Soon, Fanny Dashwood noticed Edward's affection for Elinor. Her response was vicious. With a cruel tongue, she spoke of her mother's ambitions, warning that any poor girl who tried to trap Edward would face ruin. Insulted and furious, Mrs. Dashwood decided they would stay no longer under that roof. Just then, a letter arrived, a lifeline from a kind cousin, Sir John Middleton, inviting them to live in a small cottage on his estate in Devonshire. A new beginning awaited them. To quit Norland, once a sorrowful thought, now felt like deliverance. And so, the Dashwood women left Norland behind, leaving behind grief, humiliation, and betrayal. But ahead lay new hopes, new friendships, and new trials that would test the strength of their hearts. When Sir John discovered that Marianne and Willoughby had parted, he was deeply disappointed. He had hoped to see their engagement soon announced, and their sudden separation left him quite puzzled. Lady Middleton, however, remained as quiet and indifferent as ever. Mrs. Jennings, on the other hand, was full of curiosity and speculation. Her cheerful energy found new purpose in guessing what could have happened between the young couple. Every day she built new theories, perhaps a quarrel, a family disagreement, or an unexpected journey. Elinor, though equally anxious, kept her thoughts to herself. She knew Marianne's heart was too sensitive, and she dreaded the pain her sister might be suffering in silence. Marianne tried to hide her emotions, but her sorrow was too deep to conceal. Every letter she wrote to Willoughby went unanswered. She wandered through the fields they once walked together, her eyes filled with tears, her heart heavy with memories. When rain began to fall, she didn't care to take shelter. It seemed the weather matched her grief. Elinor often watched her sister with concern. She longed to offer comfort but feared that words might only deepen Marianne's pain. Mrs. Dashwood too noticed the change in her daughter's spirit. Yet she, ever hopeful, believed that Willoughby's silence must have a reasonable cause, perhaps illness or delay or some pressing duty. Days passed and still no message came. Then one morning a letter arrived, but it was not from Willoughby. It was an invitation from Lady Middleton to attend a ball in London. Mrs. Jennings, delighted, insisted they must all go. Marianne, though weak with disappointment, agreed in the faint hope that she might meet Willoughby there. The journey to London began under heavy clouds, both in weather and in spirit. Elinor tried to remain cheerful for her mother's sake, but Marianne sat silently, gazing out the window, her mind far away. London at last. The city was alive with noise and motion, carriages rolling, voices echoing, lights gleaming through the mist. Mrs. Jennings was full of excitement, eager to show the Miss Dashwoods the bustle of town life. But for Marianne, all that glitter meant nothing. Her heart was set on one hope alone, to see Willoughby again. Each morning she looked anxiously toward the door, expecting a letter, a message, a sign, but none came. Elinor, seeing her sister's quiet despair, did her best to draw her attention to other things, but Marianne's thoughts were fixed. "He must be in London," she would whisper to herself. "He cannot have forgotten me." At last, one afternoon, their carriage passed through a busy street, and there he was. Willoughby. Marianne's heart leapt. She called his name with trembling joy, but he did not stop. He looked at her, only for a moment, and then turned away coldly, as though she were a stranger. The shock struck her like ice. She could not speak, could not breathe. Elinor held her hand, fearing she might faint. That night, Marianne could not rest. She wrote him a letter, full of tenderness and confusion, pleading for an explanation. The next morning, his reply arrived, but it was not what she had hoped. In stiff, distant words, Willoughby thanked her for her past kindness and informed her of his upcoming marriage to another woman. The letter slipped from Marianne's trembling hands. Her tears fell silently onto the paper. Elinor read the letter, her heart aching for her sister. She tried to comfort her, but Marianne could only sob. "He was mine, Elinor. He loved me once." Mrs. Jennings, though well-meaning, did not know how to console her. She brought tea, kind words, even gossip to distract her. But nothing could ease the pain. Marianne withdrew into herself, spending long hours by the window, watching the rain. Elinor feared her sister's heart might truly break. Yet, even in that grief, she admired Marianne's sincerity. For her love, though wounded, had been pure and honest from the start. The days that followed were heavy with silence. Marianne seldom spoke, her eyes dim and distant, her once lively spirit fading into quiet despair. Elinor, ever patient, never left her side. She watched over her sister with calm tenderness, offering small comforts, though knowing words could do little. Mrs. Jennings, kind-hearted in her own noisy way, tried again and again to cheer the poor girl. She invited visitors, arranged small outings, and filled the house with chatter and laughter. But Marianne remained unmoved, her thoughts chained to what she had lost. Elinor bore it all with steady courage. She too had her secret sorrows. Her feelings for Edward Ferrars weighed heavily upon her, but unlike Marianne, she concealed them beneath gentle composure. She was the strength of their little family, even when her own heart was weary. Weeks passed before Marianne's strength began to return. One morning, Elinor found her sitting quietly with a book in her lap. She was not reading, only gazing at the pages, lost in thought. "I have been selfish, Elinor," she said softly. "I thought my sorrow greater than anyone's. But you have borne yours in silence." Elinor smiled faintly, touched by her sister's words. "We each suffer differently, Marianne," she replied. "But we must both learn to hope again." That simple exchange marked a change in Marianne. She began to rise earlier, to walk in the fresh air, to play the piano again, not with the same passion as before, but with a quiet, reflective grace. Her pain had not vanished, but it had softened into understanding. Mrs. Jennings was overjoyed to see her recovering. "Ah, there's the sparkle returning," she declared one morning, clapping her hands with delight. Elinor smiled, grateful not for the sparkle, but for the peace she saw returning to her sister's face. It was then that a letter arrived, not from Willoughby, but from Colonel Brandon. His words were kind, thoughtful, and full of sympathy. He had learned of Marianne's distress and expressed his sincere concern for her health and happiness. There was no pretense, no flattery, only quiet respect. Elinor read the letter aloud, and for the first time in many weeks, Marianne's expression softened. "He is a good man," she whispered, "truly good." And though she did not yet know it, those simple words marked the beginning of her healing, and of something new, something deeper than the passionate love she had lost. A quiet affection built on kindness, patience, and respect. Thank you for listening to Vintage Tales Narrations. Stay tuned for the next episodes.